Thank you. Erev Tov, everyone. So I want to finish up a few ideas about kitniot and then speak about a different minhag that has been prevalent, especially in Ashkenazic Jewry during Pesach. Kitniot is a very elastic definition. We use kitniot as anything that is beans, peas. Now, corn, the American term corn, the English term corn refers to wheat, the grain. But the American term corn refers to maize, to sweet corn, what we call it. So that didn't exist in Europe. It was brought there after the discovery of the New World. So the shaila arises in the poskim in the 16th century: is corn kitnius or not? But because of the fact that the Native Americans used corn to make bread, so therefore, when it came to Europe, it was known also as a source of flour for bread. And therefore, that was almost a unanimous decision that corn would also be considered kitniot, even though you're adding to the original gzeira, which is something we never want to do. We don't make a gzeira l'gzeira. We don't add to the original takana that was made by the rabbis. But there are other things that arose. One of the strangest things is that in halacha it's discussed whether tobacco was kitniot, because they had chewing tobacco, which again was imported from America, from the indigenous population. And therefore, when you chew on it, it's wet. Is it kitnius or not? So most of the poskim decided that it was not kitniut, and that it's not a shaila for Pesach. It was a question of oil. What oil can be used for Pesach? Cooking oil. So traditionally, the only oil that was used was olive oil, shemen zayit, which has a very pungent taste to it and is not easily accessible in Eastern Europe. In the Middle East, it was and is, even today in Eretz Yisrael, it's a very common oil that's used for cooking or frying. But in other parts of the world, even in North America, it was not common. So what oil could be used? So people used chicken fat. I remember from my youth that my mother would start storing up chicken fat Hanukkah time. So that by the time Pesach came, you had enough chicken fat to fry an egg or other things. Because of that, what I mentioned before, there was practically no dairy foods on Pesach, because if the fat that you were using, let's say to fry an egg, was chicken fat, then you couldn't drink coffee with it with milk. So everything was either meat or parv. Chicken fat has a certain flavor to it. And it's fixed in my memory, chicken fat for Pesach.
Rivets, yeah. Rivets.
What happened then was people's tastes changed and manufacturing changed. And cottonseed oil became very available. The poskim almost unanimously decided that cotton is not kitnius, and therefore cottonseed oil would be kosher for Pesach without any problem of kitnius. And that's certainly true in the United States, and it may be in most other parts of the world. I remember that when I was the head of the OU, I had negotiations here with Ada Charedis regarding certain achsherim. They wanted to be able to take from plants that were under our factories that were under our supervision. So I had a long discussion with them. They don't allow cottonseed oil. They only use Shemin Zayis practically. And I asked them, what's the problem with cottonseed? And they told me with a straight face that cotton and kitnius is the same word. And therefore, so cottonseed is kitnius mamish. That's what they call it. So it's very hard to get cottonseed oil here in Israel. And most of the achsherim here use Shemin Zayis or other artificial types of oil. But then you have a question like canola oil, and all sorts of things that products that exist today that were unknown even 50, 70 years ago. So do they fall under the getter of kitnius? And here in Eretz Yisrael, it's very complicated anyway, because many of the achsherim on the product say specifically it's only for those that eat kitnius. For the Sfardim who do not have that chumrah. So it's not clear. Now, beginning in the 16th century also, I mentioned tobacco. In the Middle East, they would have a water pipe, an argila, in which you sucked on a tube with sips of water, but it contained within it a narcotic that was at the base of the container that held the water. Hashish, even stronger narcotics. It's an entire subject regarding the attitude towards narcotics. There's a famous tshuva from really a great man, but the tshuva is very weird, in which he says that before he davened, he would always smoke for a half hour the water pipe. And then he says, Niftachu li, the heavens opened for me. And I saw he was hallucinating, he was stoned. But he said that was the kavanah, right? He reached heaven with it. So the question arose whether or not on Pesach you could use this water pipe. So the Sephardim used it because they didn't have kidneys. But there were, in Europe also, the use of the water pipe was present in the 16th and 17th centuries. And it's mentioned in all the tshuvas. So what about Pesach? When the water pipe no longer was popular because tobacco came, cigarettes, cigars, pipe, tobacco. So then the question was whether or not kidney is transferred to tobacco, because it was, they used to call it shtiyat tabak, drinking tobacco. So drinking tobacco was the water pipe, where you actually ingested liquid that had the narcotic in it. Here we're talking about smoking. We're not talking about eating anything. So again, the problem of chewing tobacco arose. And because of that, there were many poskim who said that one should not use tobacco on Pesach. And one should not smoke on Pesach. There was a heter that existed for centuries that people smoked on Yom Tov. I don't know if you recall, but people used to smoke on Yom Tov. That heter was based upon the fact that smoking was a derivative of drinking this narcotic liquid, and so therefore it was ochel nefesh, and therefore it was permissible. In the modern age, I would say the last 70, 90 years, there are more and more poskim that are smoking on Yom Tov. And if that's also on Yom Tov, it's not because of chometz anymore. Kidneys, there's different yisurim that are involved. And it's not an ochel nefesh l'chol olam anymore, because medically it is recommended that people should not smoke at all. And therefore, the entire situation has changed. One other thing regarding kidney had to do with the importation from the New World of something called peanuts. So ordinarily, nuts are boreprioates. So anything that's boreprioates is not kidneys, does not fall into the category of kidneys. When peanuts arrived, which again was a product of the indigenous tribes who lived in the United States then, when it arrived in Europe, so there's a machlokas in the poskim about peanuts. Again, part of the reason is because the Indian tribes actually ground up peanuts and made a flour out of it. Now, we have that called pretty much peanut butter, which is ground up peanuts in oil, in peanut oil. And you can take and, bake it. And then it's like a bread. So therefore, the custom arose not to use peanuts on Pesach. However, as I mentioned before, the question of oil arose. What about oil that's made from peanuts? Peanut oil. So you can, in Israel, you can get walnut oil, which is good because walnuts are borei eggs. But peanut oil is borei peanuts are borei adomo. So then there's a machlokas whether the gzeira of kitnius applied only to the peanut itself or to shemen hayotze min kitnius, the oil that is derived from kitnius. So in our time, we're pretty much machmir on shemen hayotze min kitnius. For instance, Coca-Cola for Pesach does not use corn syrup to sweeten the drink. They only use pure sugar. Canned fruits, etc. They don't use corn syrup for Pesach. So they're machmir on shemen hayotze min kitnius. However, you will find that there's kosher lePesach peanut oil on the market. And that's because in the 1800s, Rabbi Yochanan and Kovna gave the hechsher on peanut oil. So if Rabbi Yochanan gave the hechsher, it's hard to say that. So therefore, even though peanuts are not used, but peanut oil did exist. Finally, the Chabad held that peanuts themselves are not kitnius. And therefore, peanuts can be eaten on Pesach. And in many Chabad families that followed until today. So you see that the original gzeira has evolved and grown, applies to all sorts of different things. And there was a shaila of quinoa last year, 2 years ago. It's a new type of legume that's artificially grown. Other types like that, eventually, they say you'll be able to sustain yourself on a pill once a day. So will all these gzeiras apply? Or is it because the whole thing is evolved so differently that the gzeira is not really here anymore? As I mentioned before, there have been many attempts to weaken the gzeira of kitnius over the centuries, but none of them have been successful. And therefore, I think that by the Ashkenazim, it's a very strong minhag and one that cannot be dismissed easily. And the minhag avosenu b'yadeinu, and therefore we still observe it. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Ratzah Kodesh Baruch Hu L'zakos Yisrael V'chal Chirba Lahem Torah and Mitzvot Shenemar.